Welcome to Privacy Trainer's Privacy Definitions. Now, let's continue our alphabetical journey through key privacy terms, focusing on those beginning with the letter C, from consent, the voluntary agreement to process personal data, to cybersecurity, the practice of protecting systems and data from cyber threats. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's dive in. Cache control, measures to manage browser caching to protect sensitive information from being retained locally after web sessions. California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, a comprehensive state law in California governing the processing of personal information by businesses, emphasizing transparency and consumer rights. California Investigative Consumer Reporting Agencies Act, CICRAA, regulates the use of consumer reports by employers in California, requiring disclosure to and consent from individuals. California Online Privacy Protection Act, CalOPA, mandates that websites disclose their privacy practices and allows minors to delete personal information submitted online. California Privacy Rights Act, CPRA, enhances CCPA by adding additional rights for consumers and establishing an enforcement agency. Canada's anti-spam legislation, CASL, regulates commercial electronic messages, requiring consent and providing a mechanism for recipients to opt out. Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants, CICA, oversees the ethical and educational standards of accountants in Canada. Canadian Organization for the Advancement of Computers in Health, COACH, promotes the use and development of health informatics in Canada. Canadian Standards Association, CSA, develops standards, including those related to privacy, which inform Canadian privacy law. Case law, legal principles developed through judicial decisions, guiding future adjudications. CCTV surveillance, use of video cameras to monitor a specific area, raising concerns about privacy and data protection. Census Bureau, a U.S. government agency that collects demographic information, prioritizing the confidentiality of personal data. Centralized governance, a privacy strategy that centralizes data management to a specific individual or team within an organization. Certification mechanisms, frameworks developed under GDPR to ensure that data transfers outside the EU meet EU privacy standards. Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, ensures personal data protection as a fundamental right within the EU. Charter rights, protections provided under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, including privacy rights. Chatbots, automated systems that simulate human conversation, used for customer service and data collection. Chief FOIA Officer, a designated official responsible for ensuring compliance with the Freedom of Information Act within U.S. government agencies. Chief Privacy Officer, CPO, an executive who oversees an organization's data privacy policies and practices. Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, a U.S. federal law that protects the privacy of children under 13 in the digital environment. Choice, a principle that emphasizes that individuals should have control over how the personal information is used and shared. CIA Triad, a model in information security that outlines three main objectives: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. CIO Council, advises on best practices for information technology management across the U.S. federal government. Ciphertext, encrypted data that is unreadable without the proper decryption key. Cloud computing, the delivery of computing services over the Internet, including storage, processing, and networking resources. County Regulatory Model, a system where industry and government collaboratively develop and enforce privacy standards. Code audits, examinations of software source code to ensure compliance with privacy standards and security best practices. Code reviews, meetings where developers critically assess the quality and security of source code. Codes of conduct, agreements within industries to abide by specific privacy standards, often endorsed by regulatory authorities. Collection limitation, a principle that limits the collection of personal data to what is necessary for specified purposes. Commercial activity, actions undertaken by organizations that have a commercial character, impacting privacy regulations like PIPEDA. Commercial electronic message, SEM, a type of communication that is used for promoting commercial activities, subject to regulatory requirements. Common law, law derived from judicial decisions, as opposed to statutes or regulations, influencing privacy practices. Communications privacy, protection of all forms of communication against unauthorized interception or monitoring. Completeness arguments, methodology used to ensure that software designs comprehensively address all specified privacy requirements. Comprehensive laws, regulations that provide broad protection of personal data across different sectors and types of data. Computer forensics, the practice of collecting, analyzing, and reporting on digital data in a way that is legally admissible. Computer Matching and Privacy Protection Act regulates the use of computer matching by U.S. federal agencies, particularly for data integrity and privacy. Concept of Operations, CONOPS, document that describes the characteristics of a proposed system from the viewpoint of an individual who will use that system. Confidentiality, the assurance that information is not disclosed to unauthorized individuals, entities, or processes. Confirmed opt-in, a method in email marketing requiring a second confirmation from the subscriber to ensure they genuinely wish to receive emails. Consent, a fundamental requirement in privacy law where the individual voluntarily agrees to the processing of their personal data. Consent decree, a legal agreement approved by a judge, often used in regulatory contexts to ensure compliance without admitting guilt. Consistency mechanism, a GDPR provision that ensures uniform application of data protection laws across EU member states. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, a U.S. agency tasked with ensuring consumers are treated fairly by banks, lenders, and other financial companies. Consumer Report, a document that evaluates an individual's eligibility for credit, employment, or other purposes, regulated under the FCRA. Consumer Reporting Agency, CRA, an entity that compiles and furnishes consumer reports for use in credit decisions, employment, and other purposes. Consumerization of Information Technology, COIT, the trend of adopting consumer technology within corporate environments, influencing IT policies and privacy. Content data, the substantive part of a communication, such as the text of an email, which is distinct from metadata. Content Delivery Network, CDN, a network of servers that deliver cached web content and web pages to users based on the geographic location. Context-aware computing, technologies that can adjust their operations based on user context, such as location or time of day. Context of authority, security models that adjust access rights based on the context of the user's role and environment. Contextual advertising, advertising that is targeted to the content of a web page or user's current search query. Contextual integrity, a framework for understanding privacy expectations and norms based on specific social contexts, developed by Helen Nissenbaum. Contractual clauses, standard clauses used in contracts to ensure personal data transferred outside the EU is still protected under GDPR. Controlled unclassified information, QUI, information that while not classified, must still be protected due to applicable privacy or other laws. Convention 108, a binding international treaty that ensures the protection of personal data and privacy in automated processing. Cookie, a small file stored on a user's computer designed to hold data specific to a particular client and website. Cookie Directive, EU legislation that mandates obtaining user consent for cookies and similar technologies on websites. Cooperation, a GDPR mechanism whereby EU member states' data protection authorities cooperate on cases involving cross-border data processing. Copeland versus United Kingdom, a European Court of Human Rights case that highlighted the privacy implications of workplace surveillance. Corporate-owned, personally enabled, COPE, a business model where employees are provided with devices that they can also use for personal purposes. Costager, a landmark case in the EU that established the right to be forgotten, allowing individuals to request the deletion of personal data under certain circumstances. Council of Europe, an international organization focused on promoting human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in Europe. Council of the European Union, one of the EU's main decision-making bodies, consisting of ministers from each EU member state. Coupling, in software engineering, a measure of how closely connected different modules or components are within a system. Court of Justice of the European Union, CJEU, the highest court in the EU, responsible for interpreting EU law and ensuring its equal application across all member states. Credit freeze, a security measure that prevents credit, loans, and services from being approved in your name without your consent. Credit reporting agency, an organization that collects individual credit information and provides it to creditors who wish to evaluate credit risk. Cross-border data transfers, the movement of personal data outside the geographical boundaries of one jurisdiction into another, often regulated to ensure privacy protections. Cross-site scripting, XSS, a security vulnerability typically found in web applications, allowing attackers to inject client-side scripts into web pages viewed by other users. Cryptography, the practice of securing information by converting it into unreadable code for data integrity and privacy protection. Cryptosystem, a system for secure communication, including the necessary algorithms, protocols, and keys for encryption and decryption. CSA privacy principles, 10 privacy principles adopted by the Canadian Standards Association, forming the basis of Canada's PIPEDA privacy legislation. Current baseline, a description of an organization's existing data privacy practices before implementing new policies or technologies. Customer access, the ability of consumers to access their personal data held by an organization to review, correct, or delete inaccuracies. Customer data integration, CDI, the process of consolidating and managing customer information from various sources to provide a unified view. Customer information, data that pertains to customers, distinct from employee information, and used for business operations. Cyber liability insurance, insurance that covers liability for data breaches involving sensitive customer information. Cyberbullying, the use of electronic communication to bully a person, typically by sending messages of an intimidating or threatening nature.